All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us again for the next edition of Moving Beyond the Coronavirus Economy series. And today's session is a series that we've been running now monthly for, oh goodness, close to about almost 2 years, I guess. And this is all about current franchise sales and marketing trends and really trying to take a look at the data that exists out there, some macroeconomic data, and then narrowing that down to some small business specific data, and then into franchising data. And how can we really start to use this to make us aware of what's happening in the world and how that's impacting franchise sales and marketing, and very importantly, how you can make sure that you're communicating this to franchise prospects that are interested in you that may have worries or concerns based around what's happening in the world today. So, and by the way, as we get things going, if you have any questions, comments, concerns as we're moving through this, please let me know. I do move pretty quickly, so I try to get this all done in about 30 minutes or less. So stay with me. If you haven't been with us before, just know that we'll start with some macroeconomic data, and then we'll start narrowing that down to small business data, into franchise data, and talk about that as we move through it. Just by way of disclosure, let me introduce myself here. My name is Tom DuFore. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team, and we're pleased to have all of you joining us today. So I am going to share my screen, and we will get this presentation up and moving here. So the first thing we like to talk about is the Institute of Supply Chain Management. They put together and prepare several reports each month. And so the first one we're going to talk about is the manufacturing PMI. This is one of my favorite charts. Hopefully that audio is a little better. This is one of my favorite charts because it really takes a look at what the purchasing manager sentiment is out there. And for the month of March, it was at 57.1%. And anything above this 50% line here is the manufacturing break-even line. And so it says manufacturing grew in March as manufacturing PMI registered 57.1, a 1.5 percentage points lower than the February reading. The March PMI continued to indicate strong sector expansion in U.S. economic growth in March. All 5 sub-indexes that directly factor into the manufacturing PMI were in growth territory. So needless to say, you could probably get a sense that we're still feeling the manufacturing bottleneck that's been going on out there. Things are moving in a positive direction. So if a prospect or someone says something that they're concerned about what's happening or being able to get supplies or what have you, you can reference back to this report to share this information with them to show that I love this report because it really is a leading indicator about what's happening here. The second report put together by the Institute for Supply Management is the Services Index. And it says in March, the services PMI registered 58.3%, a 1.8 percentage point increase compared to March, or compared to February reading of 56.5%. The 12-month average is 62.3%, which reflects consistently strong growth sector in the services sector. The March reading indicates the services sector grew for the 22nd consecutive month after 2 months of contraction and 122 months of growth before that. A reading above 50% indicates services sector economy is generally expanding, and below 50% indicates that that the sector is generally contracting. So the point here is services are still alive and well and doing very well and growing. So if you're in a service-oriented business, the desire for folks to be purchasing services is still there. So this is a good indicator for those sectors. And then we have the Hospital Purchasing Managers Index. This is their newest report that they started. And as you can see it in this month here, the chart here, if you look off to the lower right of the screen, the chart really dropped quite a big fall from last month. So you can see that it registered 50.4% in March, a 6.5% decrease from the February reading of 56.9%. So you can see here, since the start of 2022, January was over 60%, and then February dropped, and then March, another big drop. And, I'm sure you are all probably not terribly surprised, because we can take a look at this and say, well, maybe the hospitals have been inflated a little bit due to all of the coronavirus stuff that was going on. And if we take a look here, you can see that report, you see it's high here. And these are the daily new cases of the coronavirus. Just to take a look at that, this is from worldometers.info. And I really like their charts. Oh, let me go back down. Here it is. Sorry about that, everyone. So you can see here, it's interesting. You see the significant drop in cases starting. Here's the beginning of February, end of January. It's already on a steady decline. Now you see this dropping way down by, the end of February. It's basically negligible here. It's some of the lowest points in terms of new cases that have been out there. So it would make sense that you would start to see maybe some things start to contract a little bit or decrease in the hospital sector. But overall, I'd say this is a good thing for all of us in general, just to see that what's going on for daily new cases of corona and what's happening. And then here's the daily deaths. We can see a 7-day moving average here. And so you can see that huge spike in January seemed to be far less severe than other spikes, considering the numbers. If you look at that giant spike here, the number of people going in that were getting it back in January, 700,000, 800,000 cases a day coming through for a 7-month average. And then daily deaths, you could see that, while deaths did increase, it did not look like it was proportional to other spikes that we had in cases. So that's a good thing, I think, for all of us. So anyway, just some food for thought, and people being concerned about coronavirus, if that comes up anymore. I haven't heard it come up in a while, but if it does come up, just food for thought to be able to show and share some data points. So another key factor here people are worried about is unemployment rate. And this goes back 3 years, and you can see the unemployment rate back to early of 2019. It was about 3.6%. Then you see the pandemic hit, 14.7%, and you see the slow and steady decline here. It's 3.6% for the month of March, for March of 2022. That data just came out here recently. And so we see that continuing on. And I know labor shortage continues to be a struggle or a challenge for franchisees, for franchisors, for small businesses, and really any business across the country. And so if one way to help combat this would be to have some kind of a plan in place with your franchisees or for your franchisees. And if I'm in your shoes, I would consider talking about your hiring support for franchisees when they come in, and how you help provide resources to them to find employees. Well, you're not going to be finding or hiring the employees as the franchisor for the franchisee. It is something that you might want to consider talking about, especially if you're in an industry such as food service or maybe home services that may require a lot of people to be working for the business to make it go. So you definitely are going to want to be able to talk about it and recognize, and I would address it straight away so that the prospect knows you're not trying to avoid it or dodge it, because they're reading headlines, they're seeing the news, they're seeing what's going on. So just some things for you to talk about with the candidate. Next hot button topic item is inflation. So this is current U.S. inflation rates. I thought this was a neat little chart here. It goes back a few years to show annual inflation. And you can see that last year was 7%. We're on pace at 8.5% for this year. And inflation is a real concern. There's no doubt about it. And we talked about this last session as well. But this is just a reminder to your candidates as they're coming in. if they're concerned about inflation or they're thinking about buying the franchise, every single day that they're waiting, their dollar is worth less tomorrow than it is today. And it's worth less a week from now than it is today. So reminding them that if the more they delay, the more it's going to cost them to get the business open. And it's not to use this as a strong arm sales tactic. It's just the truth. With 7%, 8.5% inflation, prices for stuff are going to continue to go up. And so the sooner they can get in, the better. And then that couples with the Federal Reserve response here. So the Federal Reserve, which controls our interest rates, this chart here is through macrotrends.net, and this goes back to 1954 to show what the historical Federal Reserve interest rates were at. And you could see this going all the way through the late 70s, early 80s, where it was over 20% here. And then you see the rise and fall, but really on a steady decline. Early 2000s, it bumped up, and then it dropped way down after the Great Recession, and it stayed super low for a long time and started inching up again in 2016. And then things, of course, when the coronavirus hit, really plummeted. And now we're starting to see it. We see this little blip here pop back up at 0.33%. And the Federal Reserve has made it very clear that they're going to continue to raise interest rates. So, and we're already seeing this reflected in mortgage rates that are looking forward at this. So I think some of this inflation will hopefully settle down and such, and that the interest rate rising will help moderate it a little bit. But certainly when billions and billions of dollars are pumped into the economy through stimulus, there's going to be some sort of an impact there on pricing and inflation there. So just something to be talking about with these prospects to showcase. I wanted to show what this looks like from just a historical standpoint, to showcase what that looks like. And then if we just look at the past year, you can see it's been relatively low. This chart looks like it's a huge jump, but it's really just from, about, 0.8% up to 0.33%. Still very, very, from a historical standpoint, extremely low still, but on its way up. And it's a reminder to tell your prospects that if they're thinking about getting a loan, if they're thinking about borrowing money, every day they wait, every month they wait, every quarter, these things, business loans, SBA loans, it's going to continue to become more expensive to borrow money. So you have inflation going up, and it's more expensive to borrow money. If they're going to do it, you encouraging them to do it now or sooner rather than later is going to be in their best interest for minimizing their total out-of-pocket expense to get the business up and running. So I would make that very clear to your candidates. Next statistic here, this came out April 13th, so a couple days ago. This is the March new business applications or new business startups. This is one of my favorite reports that I ran across maybe 6 months or 8 months ago. And I really love these trends. And it showed in the month of March that 413,000 total new businesses were started across the country. And you can see the chart on the right here with this trend here back in about 2011. It was just over 200,000 startups a month. And that trend started increasing pretty substantially. It looked like in 2016, you see that rise, then it fell, and then just an absolute boom since about August of 2020. And you see this sustained growth over 40%, consistent expansion of new business startups. And so what does that mean? Are all of these people buying franchises? Well, no, they're not all buying franchises, but they are, people as a general thinking are thinking about starting businesses. So just remember that when prospects are reaching out to you or talking to you about this. They are serious. The mindset is there. The last 2 years, the mindset is there for starting their own business. And this great resignation, as it's called right now, people are trying to figure out what they want to do. So make sure you're thinking about it from their vantage point. They're ready to take that next step, that next phase in their career. And for a lot of them, they're starting their own business. So keep that in mind, that people are willing, it seems today, more willing to be taking that risk to go out into business on their own. So keep that in the back of your mind as you're thinking about it, and reminding prospects of that. Okay. So any quick questions here before I jump into the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index? I know I'm moving quick here, so I'll take a quick pause as we're going through it. Okay, I don't see any questions. So I'm going to jump into the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. Let me share my screen back so you can see what I'm sharing. Funny enough, I did a screen share yesterday for a presentation, and I literally talked for probably almost 10 minutes before I realized someone finally said, "By the way, we can't see your screen." And I'm talking through the whole screen share. It was pretty funny. Anyway, back to the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. We have April 4th. This came out April 4th, so last week, and it's talking about new business startups. And here are the headlines, the key takeaways that and by the way, this is produced by franchiseinsights.com. They do a great job of giving some just great small business reporting and franchise reporting each and every month. It's just really a great tool. So if we take a look here, at the top of the report, it says now 80.5% of aspiring owners see business conditions as the same or getting better for startups in the coming months. So over 80% see the conditions as the same or getting better, which is positive. And about 22.4% say that the pandemic is no longer a factor, but a record 48% say that it reduced the amount of capital that they have to invest. So almost 1 out of 2 prospects are saying that the pandemic impacted their amount of money to spend on starting up a business. So survey respondents say now is a good time to start their business, 67.7%. And this is all current survey data. Here's the 80.5% see business conditions as the same or getting better. You can see that there. Sentiment about starting now versus 3 months ago. I'm going to skip to a couple of charts that I really like to look at. Starts this month is at a 4-month high. People are saying, I'm ready to start this month right now. So you can see this green bar is folks looking at starting this month. And startup intent within the next 3 months is at 52.9%. So just over half of the respondents said they intend to start a business in the next 3 months. So I think that's important to note. That means people are thinking of doing this now. It's not I'm going to wait and see. Half of the people are thinking in the next quarter, the next 3 months, April, May, June, they're looking to get this started right now. So keep that in mind as you're talking to your prospects, that they may not be conveying to you a great sense of urgency, but that urgency very well is probably hiding in the wings, that you can't see it, but it's there. So make sure you make note of that. Concerns over funding is still paramount. So I want to scroll down. Here we go. This is the chart I want to show. So it says, which of these factors will have the biggest impact in the next 6 months in your decision to start a business? So I know a lot of people, we talked about the economic climate. We talked about a lot of different things happening leading up to it, but still far above and away. It's not even close to these other categories. Funding or access to credit is number one. The number one concern. More than 75% of the respondents said funding or access to credit is their number one concern. And number two is economic climate. And you can see it's kind of been on this steady rise, 37.3%. And that kind of tends to coincide with the concerns with the war in Ukraine and Russia, Russia and Ukraine, and you've got rising interest rates and inflation. You kind of see that starting to tip up right when those inflation conversations really start to pick up at the first of the year. You see there a little tick up there, but it is still not even close to concerns for funding or access. So what does this mean? And why is this important to you? This means that if you're in selling franchises, 3 out of every 4 prospects you're talking to is concerned about getting funding. And how are they going to get it? So having a solution to funding is critical. Partnering up with a franchise funding service or solution may be helpful. Maybe you have a bank or two that's provided loans or has provided loans to franchisees of yours in the past. I'd be reaching back out to those banks that recent franchisees have used for funding to see if they might be interested in funding other franchisees in your network. If they've provided an SBA loan or maybe a conventional business loan, I'd be thinking about that. Maybe you have a small investment group that might be interested in helping franchisees get up and going. Whatever it is, I would be thinking of ways in which to provide a solution to your franchisees or have something for them to talk about and think about on how to do that. So jumping over to the next chart here, this is a very interesting one. This just came out 2 days ago on franchiseinsights.com. And the headline here is a longer term look at the change in state shares of franchise prospect interest through franchise lead flow. So what this is saying is, where is the percentage of interest of buyers based on the total number of leads? So you can see on this first chart here on the left side in 2018, this is going to show the top 10 states' share of franchise interest in March of each of these years. So in March of 2018, the top 10 states accounted for 59.53%. So almost 60% of all inquiries were in these top 10 states. California was number 1, Texas number 2, Florida number 3, New York number 4, Georgia number 5, New Jersey 6, Pennsylvania 7, North Carolina 8, Illinois 9, and Ohio 10. And you can see how some of these things start to change. In 2020, March of 2020, Texas bumped up to number 1. California dropped to number 2. Florida stayed the same at number 3. Georgia bumped up to 4. New York dropped to 5. North Carolina bumped up to 6. New Jersey looks like it dropped to 7. Illinois bumped up to number 8. Pennsylvania dropped to number 9. And Ohio stayed at number 10. And then we see from 2020 over to March of 2022, look at the pop back up here for California. So California bumped up to number 1 in 2022. They're back at the top. And certainly you think just based on population, Texas is number 2 and Florida is number 3. Well, California, Texas, Florida in that order are the most populated states in the country. So it certainly would make sense that they would have a higher percentage share of lead flow. You would think of that. New York is actually number 4, but Georgia here is number 4 on the list in terms of lead flow. New York is number 5. North Carolina is number 6. Illinois is number 7. New Jersey number 8. Pennsylvania number 9, and Ohio State at number 10 again. So for the entire month of March in 2022, these are your top states for franchise interest. So if you're looking at expanding, 60% of your leads are coming through from these states. So just however that may apply to your marketing trends, it's worth noting. Top gains, state changes in terms of share of franchise interest. I think this is interesting. So the top gains, which will actually show you here, but you can see top gains. So where were the biggest gains from March of 2018 to March of 2022? So even though these top states here showed the total number of leads, where was the growth the greatest? Where was the greatest gain in terms of interest? Arizona, number 1. Tennessee, then Alabama, Missouri, Nevada, Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina. So these 10 states here are where you see franchise interest growing the most. So these could very well be hot prospective states for you to be considering expanding into: Arizona, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, Nevada, Kentucky, Maryland, and North Carolina. And then these states saw the greatest loss in terms of percentage change from March of 2018 to March of 2022. California, Michigan, Florida, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Colorado, Washington, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York had the greatest change there. Okay, so we talked about this one here. So this is this chart I'm going to show you here is essentially showing you these changes that we just talked through on those bar graphs. It's going to show you on the on a picture of the country here. So you can see the gains. These green states are where we're seeing the greatest gains of franchise leads. And this is a change in share of franchise interest from Q1 of 2020 to Q1 of 2022. So over the last 2 years, where has the change happened? So you can see it's neat to see these trends happening. This is a 2-year trend. You see these green states, and it's very clear that it's going south and westward, south and southwest. That's where it's expanding. You can see the loss in these red. The pink is this kind of salmon color, and pink color is small change. And the darker it gets to, closer it gets to red, the red indicates the greatest change in terms of loss for states. So depending on where you're expanding, these green states may very well be where you want to be focusing some of your franchise marketing and lead gen efforts, where we see growth and interest in those states. Just some ideas and suggestions for you. And as we start to bring this to a close here, one of my favorite things to talk about is franchise data by category. And so this is the most active franchise categories over the last 90 days. And so these categories of businesses have received the most inquiries in the last 90 days. And again, this is from Franchise Insights. And so as we zoom in here, you can see home services is still very high. 20.6% of all inquiries were in home services. Senior and healthcare is 13.1%. Business services, 12.5%. Food and restaurant, number 4 at 11.7%. Cleaning and maintenance at 9.9%. And health and fitness has really surged again, up to 5.2%. So you're starting to see some of these industries that were really impacted by the pandemic starting to come back. Food and restaurant, health and fitness are bouncing back, and home services is just staying strong. It's really popped up. So just some food for thought there. And a reminder here, franchise opportunities by cost as a percentage of cost. This is about liquid capital, of how much liquid capital franchisees have available. About half of the franchise prospects have between 25 and 50,000. And then another 31.7% have between 50 and 100,000. So what's this really saying? Well, it shows that basically about 80% of all franchise buyers have between 25,000 and 100,000 in liquid capital. So if your franchise investment requires somewhere between $25,000 and $100,000 in liquid capital, you're going to be, looks like where you look to be in kind of that sweet spot for franchise investment, where franchise candidates have cash there. So that's the presentation for today, folks. Thank you for joining us. I'd love to open things up for any questions, comments, concerns. If you're seeing something out there that maybe we're missing, we'd love to hear it. So go ahead and just raise your hand, type a comment into the chat box. I can unmute you for the group that we have on with us right now. All right. I don't see any hands raising, just attendees dropping off. So thank you all for tuning in today. Happy Good Friday to those of you out there that will be celebrating today. And I wish you all a great weekend. Enjoy the holiday. Happy Good Friday and happy Easter weekend. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.